Rumor has it, your network is your net worth. But what do you do if you would rather swim with the sharks instead of attend another awkward networking reception or happy hour with your coworkers? In this episode, we are going to hone deep into your conversation skills and help you shine bright like the little diamond that I know that you are in order to build the right relationships, whether you're at work, at home, or with your friends. Welcome back to Organized Chaos. My name is Regan and I am so very, very happy that you're here. This is part 3, I think it is, of our 4-part confidence series. We have already done a session on what confidence is, how to avoid judgment from others, and today we are going to be chatting about how you can talk to absolutely anybody, because I know how freaking awkward it can be if you're trying to have a conversation and just trying to attend networking receptions, make new friendships, whatever it is. If you do not feel like you have the conversation skills or you have no idea what the hell to talk to anybody about, this episode is going to be awesome for you to listen in on, because I have been there. I have totally been there. I am the type of person who needs to almost have like cards in my back pocket, little tips, little tricks in my back pocket that I can pull out whenever I feel like, I need to talk to somebody. I don't really know how to talk to them. And so I'm about to share all of the little tips and tricks that I've gathered over the course of my life for you to use for yourself. And if you haven't already subscribed, make sure that you do, because I want you to stay up to date on all of the different parts of the confidence series. Now look, I hate networking receptions as much as the next person. And I don't necessarily think that's because there's something inherently wrong with networking itself. It's in the way that we're doing it. Most of us, when we try to start a new relationship, whether we're at a networking reception or just trying to get to know a new friend, we come with one very specific goal in mind, and that's normally about ourselves. And that's your first mistake. You're making it too much about what you need and not enough about the other person. It's too transactional. Relationships are not meant to be transactional. If you are trying to build a one-sided relationship, that's all it will ever be. It's not going to continue past the point of what you need in that moment. Now, don't be this person. Don't be the person that walks into a networking reception and just eyes certain people, walks on up to them, and starts downloading on what they do, why they're so cool, all the different things in their life, and doesn't even let the other person come up for air to say something about themselves. That is likely the worst way to try and form a relationship with somebody if you're just talking about yourself the whole time. How many times have you been in that same exact situation because what you end up doing, the person on the other side, is just checking out? You're just like, I can't be here anymore because all you're doing is talking at me. Relationships, networking, whatever you want to call it, it's more of a dance. It's more of an art. There's a little bit of science involved with it, and we'll get into that later on in this episode, but you have to remember it's not all about you. This video is going to answer how can you start networking, what can you say to people, how can you get better at conversations, and how can you politely decline and leave when the conversation gets just a little bit too much. All right. First disclaimer I'm going to start with, though, is I know I just said that you are not the most important thing here, but I'm going to backtrack that a little bit and say, remember that you exist too. In all of this, take it with a grain of salt, because you should never be forced into a conversation that you feel uncomfortable in, into a conversation that is spiking your anxiety past the point of what you feel like you can handle. And so in every single step of this video, I want you to remember that. I want you to remember that you exist too. You need to be asking yourself, why am I here? What is the purpose? Am I feeling fulfilled? Now, as we are building the skill, there are going to be moments where you might want to back out. I encourage you to push yourself through. I encourage you to keep going, because you've got this. Like, you totally have this. You just need to remember that. You can do this. Everyone finds it awkward to meet somebody for the first time. You are not the only one. But if you get pushed to the point where you're like, I really need a break, go and take that break. Now that we have the disclaimer out of the way, we are going to dive into why networking actually matters. What's the point of it? Because I get asked all the time, why do I need to do it? It doesn't work. It's not fun. I can't do it. It's too hard. Girl, no. You're just not doing it in a way that makes sense for you. Have you ever heard of the term, the strength of weak ties? Every single one of my roles in my life has come through somebody not directly related to me, somebody I didn't know personally, but through a friend of a friend of a friend, or a colleague of a colleague of a colleague. And I'm sure this has happened to all of you multiple times. This is called the strength of weak ties. The majority of people actually end up getting their roles or new opportunities in life through people that know someone that knows someone that knows someone. Think about the last time that you maybe found an apartment, a job, you got into a school, even a recommendation that you had somebody write. those people, you probably didn't know them personally. You may have not known their mom or the dad's name, but you knew them well enough through your network that you could go and ask for something. That is the concept of the strength of weak ties. That is why we network. We network so that we can get exposed to new people, opportunities, we can learn new things, we get to know more about the world. Closing yourself off from that means that you're closing yourself off from those potential opportunities, which inherently diminishes our confidence. In being a block for yourself, not allowing yourself to build that confidence, not allowing yourself to go and try new things, well, that's a damn shame. Even if you're not necessarily looking to go and learn something, remember that connection is why we are all here. We want to feel connected to the world. I've talked about this in my episode about friendships. I talked about this even in the fear of judgment, getting over the fear of judgment, which was the episode in the Confidence series last week. This point of connection is why we all exist on this earth. It is what allows us to continue to be fueled as humans. And while it might seem so hard to create some of those relationships, especially with your colleagues over Zoom, it's so important because it actually ends up creating psychological safety. And the concept of psychological safety means that you can show up as your best self in the moments where you are needed. Psychological safety is the crux of every single relationship, whether it's familial relationships, work relationships, you name it. You need to feel safe enough that you can show up as who you are exactly in that moment. Not afraid to say something that someone's going to disagree with, not afraid to go out on a limb or create a new idea. These are all of the reasons why we want to continue to build confidence, because walking around in the world feeling like you deserve to be here, feeling like you can tackle whatever ends up coming at you, that is so much more comfortable than the alternative, than feeling like you're this wallflower that constantly has to stand on the side, that constantly needs to be worried about what someone else says about you or thinks about you. No one else is spending near the amount of time thinking about you as you are. I can guarantee that. But it's so easy to get in our heads and our little brains and tell ourselves that we can't go and do that thing. We can't go and do that presentation because someone else is going to judge us. We can't go and launch that podcast because someone else is going to judge us. We can't go and get that promotion because it's automatically going to be a no. In next week's episode, we're going to take a deeper dive into imposter syndrome and some of the benefits that I actually think that you can glean from imposter syndrome itself. But in this week's episode, we're going to talk about how you can start to have conversations, how you can step out onto that ledge, how you can start to ask for what you need and what you want, because you deserve it. You deserve to have this place here. You deserve to be on this earth. You deserve to be in this place. And I don't ever, ever, ever want you to forget it. Okay, so how do you actually become easy to talk to? There are a couple different ways, and some of them might be unexpected. The first step is, why do you actually want to talk to somebody? What is the goal here? What do you want to do? Are you trying to, as I said earlier on, learn something new, build a new skill, meet more people, get a promotion, find a new job? The opportunities here are really endless, but you have to find that why. Because if you don't have a reason that's actually bringing you towards why you want to meet these people, why you want to connect with people, then it's going to be really hard to continue and plaster that smile on your face. While we don't want to over-index on this point, right? We don't want to walk into a room and just immediately start asking and demanding things from people. This is going to drive where we end up meeting people, how we end up meeting people, who we surround ourselves with. And this is so important because your time is precious. Your spoons are precious. I've talked about that concept a trillion times over, but if you are new here, it's this idea that every single day you wake up with a certain number of spoons. Spoons equate to energy. And throughout the day, you give those spoons away. You give that energy away. And if you don't keep track of them, you are going to end up depleted. But that depletion actually takes away from your ability to get closer to the things that you really, really want to achieve if you are not being cognizant about it. We want to be so respectful of our time, of our energy, of our effort, that we are thinking through the steps that we take in life. So many people just end up kind of doing things because they're told to do it. They go to this networking reception because they're told to do it. They talk to this person for 30 minutes because, well, that's what I'm supposed to be doing, right? They wanted to chat to me, so why not? Instead of thinking about, well, what's my real goal here? Do I just want to make a friend? Great. Do I actually want to learn a specific skill? Great. Do I want to learn more about something? Even better. There is a reason behind every single conversation that you have. I suggest you go and find it. I am super picky about every single event that I end up going to, and that is because I know I'm going to burn out if I go to too many. And being picky allows me to show up 1,000%. It allows me to be in it at that exact moment in time. I show up at the event, I feel great about myself, I'm excited, I'm happy, I'm energetic, I'm ready to go and learn the thing that I want to learn and talk to as many people as possible. My events become 10 times more successful when I approach them that way. But there was a point in my life when I was getting dragged to 1,000 different conferences. And that was because that was part of my job, yes, but I wasn't really thinking about what's the actual strategy here. You can kind of take it as if you work in marketing or sales or really any particular role, but specifically marketing and sales because you're actually out in the field, what is the strategy that you employ when you go and meet new clients? That's the same exact thing for you in your personal life that we should be translating over. What strategy are you deploying so that you are meeting the right people who are going to fuel you instead of take away from the energy that is so precious? Once you know why you need to be somewhere, where you actually want to be, then we are going to take a look at this idea of competence versus warmth. There's a big misconception in the networking world that you need to be best friends with everybody that you meet. Or on the other end, you can only talk about business. Actually, the most successful networking conversations happen somewhere in the middle because there's this scale of competence versus warmth that equate to trustworthiness. I'm typically seen as somebody who's very warm. I can have conversations easily, I can make friends with people, I get people to trust me. But on the other end of that spectrum is somebody who maybe is a little bit more reserved and just focused on the skills that they have. Those people are often considered closed off and may not display the same traits of trustworthiness. But when they're like that, they are displayed as more competent. Somebody who's warm, people often don't think have the same level of competence as somebody who is a little bit quieter and more subdued. But the real trustworthiness, where the real magic happens, is when you can fit somewhere right in the middle. And that totally transformed the way that I approached networking. Because instead of just showing up and being bubbly and kind and asking about somebody's day, I instead tried to weave in to conversations levels of competence. I calmed down, I mirrored, I looked at somebody and I said, okay, what kind of person is this person? What kind of person am I? What are your goals? What are my goals? And how can I change the way I'm having this conversation so that I can come across as somebody who is trustworthy and warm and honestly still keep my personality because I don't want to lose that, but weave in that competence that I know I have. I know I'm an intelligent person, but not forget that people need to see that from you in order to know that you're great at what you do. And here's how you're going to master that competence and warmth scale. The first thing that you're going to do is please be a freaking real person. I mean, I could go on and on about this, but be a real human being for God's sake. Do not need to show up to every networking event just talking about you and your skills. I mean, we have all encountered that person who has just blabbed at us, just constantly, just does not stop talking. And you're like, please just stop. Who all you want to do is get away from the conversation with them because you cannot imagine a world where you would want to interact with this person again. That kind of person may have the competence, right? You might be like, I can tell that you are an intelligent person, but you don't have the warmth needed in order for me to really want to continue this relationship. So you need to be a real person. Dale Carnegie, in one of my favorite books, How to Win Friends and Influence People, says, use people's names. One of my pet peeves is when people tell me, oh, I just can't remember names. The hell you can't. You can absolutely remember a name. Here's how you do it. Hi, my name is Regan. Oh, hi, Regan. It's so wonderful to meet you. Regan, how do you spell that? I just said their name twice. Hearing your name is one of the sweetest words in your vocabulary. People forget that. You don't need to know somebody that well to know their name, yet automatically it creates this even playing field. It creates this playing field where someone feels like you actually care about them. I have an arguably difficult name to remember. People often call me Reagan, but when people even try to make an effort to remember my name, I feel 10 times closer to them. I feel like, you know what? You are somebody who likely shares my values, who wants to create that warmth around somebody in order to build the foundation of a strong relationship. So don't forget just how far repeating someone's name can go. And speaking of repeating, one of my favorite things that I've actually learned from probably both my therapist and the salespeople that I have worked with throughout my career is the concept of repetition. If you don't always know what to say or how to follow up with somebody after they've said a sentence, or you need time to think about, what am I going to ask after I've just heard the story? Repeat them. Validate them. People love to feel like you are listening and that their experiences are validated. If they say, oh, I just went on this big beach vacation with my family for a couple of weeks, you can repeat, oh, a beach vacation? That's awesome. That sounds so much fun. Tell me where it was. That's a really easy way to start connecting those dots. It's an easy way to create those transitions. Conversations can often feel stuck if you just jump from one topic to another to another. You'll notice this in TV hosts or podcast hosts. You need to transfer from one statement to another statement, from one section to another section. But what you try to do is weave in things that you've learned about the person beforehand in order to create a smooth transition. People will want to listen. People will want to be a part of the conversation if you do it this way. And I promise it's so much easier than you think that it is. All you need to do is listen, repeat, validate throughout the conversation, and then your brain will naturally start to pick up on it when you want to move the conversation in a certain direction. The trap here is you don't want to focus too much on somebody else, because what that ends up feeling like is an interview. If you're just spewing questions at somebody, it doesn't feel like you are vulnerable enough to let somebody know about you. In that vulnerability, being a real person, that is where the magic happens. Have you ever heard about the pratfall effect? I'm going to tell you about the pratfall effect because this effect has totally changed the way I see networking. And it's the idea that when you are real, when you admit to not knowing something, when you show a moment of vulnerability, or when you get something wrong, people perceive you as more human than the alternative. If you just pretend that you are the world's most perfect person bouncing around, you seem so unapproachable. And in a networking situation, that's the exact opposite of what we want to do. We want to be honestly so approachable that people feel like they can come up and easily have a conversation with somebody. Now listen, I hear you. It can be really hard when you go into a networking room and feel like people are judging you. Your brain starts to tell you that you need to do everything right. That is a straight up lie. If you do everything right, people aren't going to be as willing to continue that conversation. So practice the art of saying, I don't know, tell me more about that. I had no idea. I'd love to learn more. Oh, how interesting. You seem so passionate about this. Can I learn more from you? There's so many ways that you can rephrase this. The idea is to get comfortable with just opening up the conversation of, I had no idea that this thing existed. You are clearly an expert. Please tell me more. It means you're in it. It means you are listening. So few people actually sit and listen in these networking conversations. I can tell when you don't know. I can tell when I've just broached a subject that you have no idea about, and yet you pretend you nod along, and then it's very easy to recognize that this conversation can't go very far if you're not really sure what I'm talking about. If you're pretending to be an expert on a subject that you have no idea about, well, why are you even doing that? It makes it more difficult for both of us. And then one of us ends up needing to do the emotional labor. So get comfortable with this idea of saying, I don't know. One of my last tips for this episode, I have so many more on my sleeve though, so please send me a DM. Let me know if I should do a part 2 on this, because I honestly could keep going. If there's one thing that you take away from how to have better conversations, it's this: give more than you take. We all want something, right? Like, that's the point of networking. But the lasting relationships, the areas where people get the most done, is when they can offer something first and then ask for something second. Don't create transactional relationships. Don't make people assume that because you're giving them something, they're going to need to give you something in return. But what you're doing here is you are providing value. You are showing somebody that you are generous with your time, with your words, with your energy, that you are somebody who truly looks to lift other people up. And that is the kind of person people naturally are drawn to. That is the kind of person people want to be around. And that is the way that you are going to have much better conversations, easier conversations, and find it more fun and less draining for you when you reach the end of that networking reception. Now, if you are in the middle of a conversation that you absolutely do not want to be in the middle of, here is what you can do. It's some of my favorite tricks. I've learned this from running events for so many years, because you have to go out into the crowd. You have to go and talk to people. But there's definitely a point when you kind of hit a wall. You're like, I'm not sure this conversation is necessary anymore. I'm not sure we need to be having this. I'm not sure if we fit and jive in the way that you think we do. All you need to do is take the presumptive close. You look for a moment in the conversation. Even if there's not a super clear moment, you can still find one. You look for that drop. You look for the end of a sentence that somebody has that doesn't open up the conversation to something more. And then you can say, it's been so wonderful chatting with you. That's all. That's literally it. The second that you say, it's been so wonderful chatting with you, let me get your phone number. Let me get your email address. Let me follow up on this thing that I promised you earlier on, because remember, we want to give more than we actually take, and they know that you'll follow up on it if you do it this way. and then you just walk away. It's as easy as that. You do not need to be best friends with everyone that you spend time with at a networking reception. Another thing that you can do at the beginning of a conversation with somebody is be clear. I only have 10 minutes. I have 30 minutes. I use this tactic all the time in meetings. I will sit down and say, "Hi, I'm Regan. It's so lovely to meet you. I just wanted to let you know I only have 10 minutes for this chat. Is that going to be okay?" That way people are primed. That way people know that they can only fit in what they have in those 10 minutes. And then you need to be strong to your boundaries. You need to hold those boundaries and actually leave at the 10-minute mark. But that creates a really clear opening for you at the 10-minute mark, 30-minute mark to say, "Hey, we've reached the end of the 10 minutes. It's been so great chatting. Anything else that you wanted to follow up on before I take off?" That way you create a really clear start and a really clear finish. People love communication. People don't get upset when you clearly communicate with them. If you just drop off midway through a conversation because you forgot to tell them that you need to go or you just want to get out of there, that's where you're going to start to upset people. That's where you're going to start to make people feel like, wow, I don't feel valued in the way that you probably wanted to. You were just afraid of hurting their feelings. Now, if you find yourself as a pretty consistent people pleaser, if you find yourself having a really hard time setting these boundaries, I have another video, an episode on how do you avoid people pleasing, where it comes from, why you might want to start changing some of those habits of yours. That'll be a great video for you to pair with this one. All right, that brings us to the very end of today's episode. Thank you so very much for sticking around. This is part 3 in our 4-part confidence series. In this episode, we went over how you can start to have really strong conversations with people, how you can lay the groundwork to show up as somebody who feels confident in those conversations, how you can create transitions for conversations, how you can create that rapport that you're going to need in order to go and achieve all the goals that you want to achieve, but then also how you can leave conversations without feeling like you're just dropping the hammer in the middle of it. If you have any comments, if you have any questions, please send me a DM, let me know, drop it in the comment section. I always love hearing from you all. And like I said, I could probably even float this out into a part 2. I have so many more points that I'm even thinking of off the top of my head. And don't forget to tune in next week for our final episode in the confidence series. We are closing out the summer with being our biggest, brightest, most confident self. Because if you are forgetting that, if you are forgetting that you are a diamond shining so very brightly, I'm going to come on over there and just yell affirmations at you constantly. Just remind you constantly how amazing you are, how worthy you are, and how you are allowed to take up space. Make sure you start to practice all of these different conversation tips. Go out, have chats with people. Go and practice this with your barista. Go and practice this with your mom. Go and practice this with your friends. Practice having those transitional conversations because I swear it's a skill that you're going to want to build. It's going to make it so much easier. Just repeat someone's name. Just validate them. Just make them feel like a human being. Also, remember, you are allowed to be an equal human being too in every single one of those situations. You do not need to be perfect. I'm Regan, and this has been another episode of Organized Chaos. I will see you next time. Thanks, everyone.